Hello, everyone. Today, it's our pleasure to have Dr. Aswini Sarma on this panel. We are honored to have you, Dr. Sarma. Dr. Sarma has 36 plus years of experience working in different domains. He has also served as Director General at NIE LIT, and currently he's working as Vice Chancellor at Symbiosis Skills and Professional University. Uh, he has so diverse experience that we would like to discuss some very important points with him about future of scaling in the current scenario when everything is uncertain because of this pandemic. So how do we see that? What kind of skills do we need in future? So it's a pleasure having you, Dr. Sarma. And my first question to you would be, so according to a report of McKinsey in 2017, approximately 14% of the global workforce would have to switch occupations or acquire new skills by 2030. And especially after this post-pandemic pandemic thing, we see that it would happen soon, earlier than 2030. So what are your thoughts on that? And is there anything that Indian government is doing in that direction to improve this thing?
Uh, I think very well coined question and at the right appropriate time. Because if you see that because of use of AI and robotics and the new emerging areas, and especially after the COVID, the use of technology has become a mandate for all of us. Whether it is a judiciary system, education system, administrative system, e-governance, the governance system, any system which you call upon, you will find that now we are basically, the entire socio-economic system is entering into a phase of accelerating transformation, which includes the markets, the business, the education, the social welfare, the employment model, everything. And this has basically been impacted, one because of COVID, of course, it has come early, but definitely because of mainly the automation and the artificial intelligence. Now, it is a fact that this impact of AI and automation will be positive also in terms that it will try to create new job roles where one has to understand the new technology, has to be having knowledge of the emerging areas. But on the other side, it will have a, you will see that because of tasks that are monotonous in nature, they will, which can be easily automated, they will gradually make certain roles obsolete. Which what I mean by that is that, for instance, tasks and activities which are related to customer call or customer care or maybe operation or maybe document classification, discovery, retrieval, maybe anything which is mainly having a major manual component, these activities will definitely be taken over by the AI implementation. And since they are based on technology and automation, less of human work will be involved in this. And the same is true for roles related to operation, support of production, or factories. Now humans are being replaced by smart robots that can safely navigate the space, find the moving objects, or perform complex assembling operation. And this will have major impact on sectors like transportation. Now if you see, the automated cars are coming, which are self-driven. Now once these self-driven cars are coming, you will find that the requirement of the driver or the chauffeur which you need, they will go off. So definitely there will be impact on such activity. Similarly, if you see electronic commerce, everything is basically voice enabled. You can do, you can program your activities, you can do transactions online, you can navigate the space to collect products and execute customer online system. So again, the salesman, the network of physical stores will shrink. They will start shrinking. And the moment they are start shrinking, definitely the job roles there will go away. Similarly, if you see the legal profession, now there is a babu who types, there is a babu who takes a dictation, then classification of documentation, then summarization of the note. After the introduction of the AI and the robotics, especially the AI part, these again low-end jobs roles which are there in the legal profession, they will also go away. Similarly, if you see the financial sector or maybe the financial service or insurance sector, or any other sector which require a significant amount of data processing or content handling will also benefit from AI. But definitely will have an impact in terms of job roles. Now, the most important thing is that AI can even, have a great role in eliminating the bureaucrats in decision making, in execution of the improving the service to citizen, and along with the design and performance the social program. Now, it has been seen that 5% of the job roles can be easily automated, which means 100% this is sure that at least 5% job roles will have an impact because of automation also. Now, there is a organization which is, I think, Economic Cooperation and Development. They have found that 14% of jobs in almost 32 countries has a high probability of automation, and with a further 32% job likely to be changed by automating technologies. And it is possible that 30% of jobs are at high risk in automation by early 2020, the date which we targeted that will be there. And when looking across the country, it is being felt that proportion of high jobs or proportion of jobs at high risk varies from 22% to 39%. But one thing is very clear, let's not be very disheartened by looking into that. On the other side, artificial intelligence and automation will have a supportive role to humans. They will empower the human factor to perform better in handling complex and critical situations that require judgment and creative thinking, which we have been lagging. If you see, the World Economic Forum also says that in the times to come, because after Industrial Revolution 4.0, it is a time that you will find that we need to have a complex problem solving skill or critical thinking. So that will be supported by the artificial intelligence that is there. And there will be needs for highly skilled professionals to oversee or manage or coordinate the training of complex artificial intelligence system to ensure their integrity, security, objectivity, and proper use. So on one side, the low-end job roles will get diminished because of automation or maybe because of ITNA. But on the other side, you will find that many other activities will start working. On our report also include opinion that finally, in the times to come, 7% of respondents said that they are worried about the impact of automation in their own job, and 28% are worried because they feel that they will lose the job in their local area. Because once the automation will start, those who are in the village area, they will definitely start losing the job role. That is there. The workforce and the underlying employment models will move from long-term full-time employment agreements to flexible, selective, premium service offering. This will be the, again, second change which will be brought by automation, because if you see, after the COVID, the work from home has given a freedom to you. But on the other side, the working hours has increased. And instead of 5 o'clock, you have to work up to 7 o'clock also sometime, even 9 o'clock also. So that is there. As far as you asked the second question, the second part of this question, yes, Indian government and also the state governments have already started working on this. Government are trying to maximize the opportunities and minimizing the risk of automation and use of artificial intelligence. It is being also suggested that government has to take steps to minimize the opportunities, and this is only possible by development of new skill sets in the education system. And that's the reason, if you see the new education policy, the new emerging areas have been part of that, where the skill set will start, the training part will start from the 6th class onwards. Now, one thing which is very important to be looked into over here is that societies also need to adapt new technology landscape, become more flexible, and also inherit an attitude of lifelong learning, collaboration, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Also, new strategies to be focused in education system, where basically we have to rethink how markets, companies, or employment agreements should be signed in, because now the after use of AI or robotics or automation, the agreements format style will also change. And at even higher level, we need to have a solid framework to avoid the unbalanced concentration of technology power and control. That is very important. The power should not go to some limited hands. So that need to be looked into. And I mean, definitely, the government is also trying to conduct research into alternative income and taxation models, how this will be taken care. Similarly, they are trying to work out which are the jobs they need to do a research and start training and skilling of those youth or those workers who are in the high risk zone of their activity, especially in the after the use of the AI or the robotics.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. I think that is going to happen. Government is going to work, and we all are seeing the unemployment that is increasing day by day. So there could be multiple reasons, but government is definitely serious about this thing, and they are probably working on the things you discussed. So, which brings me to the next question, that we have seen historically digital transformation happening because of COVID-19. We could never imagine that teachers of Indian colleges and schools using platforms like Zoom technology, they were so they were so they were so hesitated to use this earlier, and now they are using this technology, and most of the workforce that has shifted to work from home. So how do you see with respect to the future? Do you think that it is going to continue in the same direction, and we would not need physical infrastructure anymore when it comes to colleges and schools? uh, so how do you see, what is your opinion on this, and what is the positive and negative side of this?
See, one thing is definitely very much visible to all of us, that sometimes we do when we are forced to do, rather than by picking up by our own choice. And this is what COVID has done. COVID has made us to start using technology. Even those who are not even habitual of using the technology, they have started using. Especially when you feel that you have to order a food, you have to order a medicine, you cannot make contact with anyone, you have to ensure social distancing. So definitely this has a blessing in disguise. It has become a blessing in disguise in terms of education system in country. And that is the reason that after the COVID, because of COVID, every school, every education system, whether university, college, or even the regulatory bodies, they have started using the technology. I mean, you will be surprised to know that even the inspections are carried out by the regulatory bodies using the technology in online mode. And definitely this will continue. Even if you see, the new education policy has rather encouraged online education. They are saying that we must use technology, maybe the education may be in blend mode. And that's the reason universities have been allowed to use online education for 40% of the credit. So there is a change. Otherwise, I remember almost 4 or 5 years back, it was 20%, then it became 30%. Now it has become 40%. And even Government of India has come out with a policy that first 100 universities will be allowed to go for 100% online education. So definitely this has proved that India has got an infrastructure. Of course, I will not say a full proven infrastructure, but definitely it has encouraged and suggested and rather made us to think that definitely we have to rethink on our infrastructure, we have to rethink on our faculty. But one thing which has emerged out of this is that even the teachers, which you said very correctly, were very hesitant, they were not very reluctant to use technology. That mindset has gone now. Now there is a system where we go for an online education, which we feel is very flexible. It can be used anywhere, anytime. Of course, we need to have a very good internet connection. Then it is more, you can give your convenient attendance. You can do multiple jobs also, attending the class, doing some other job also, that has become part of that. And the best part is that you can record it out and you can use it for lateral reference. मुझे याद है अच्छी तरह कि पहले ये कहा जाता था no mobile in class. Now it is being said mobile only in class. So that's the basic mindset which has come up. Now the basic the challenge which we are finding, that definitely once you have a on-campus classes or the offline classes, it is definitely that you develop a lot of teamwork, which we are lacking here. So we need to work out, evolve a system that in the use of online technology for education, how that can be worked out. Then feeling of isolation by individual has come up. Minimal peer help, group work not as sufficient as it would be if done offline. So that is missing. And the major thing is that we are, the teachers are not well equipped with the equipment. They are not well aware with the technology. They are not aware that how the different tools which are available on platform for webinars, or maybe the Zoom classes, or I mean the classes, online classes are to be used. But I am sure that in the times to come, this will continue. Maybe not 100%, maybe 40%, 50%, but definitely there will be option that a student can do online class or can do offline. See, try to understand the basic two advantage out of this is, in a city which are metropolitan in nature or big, very, I mean, highly congested, traveling time is being saved. There is a saving on petrol. While traveling, you have to go by car if you are in a position to, own the car, or your parents are in a position to own the car. So that fuel charges will go down, the commutation time will go down, the pollution in a city like Delhi, Noida, that will go down. So definitely it has got a built-in advantage of having an online education. So it will depend upon the parents and the university. But I feel that it will be 40-60, which means the online courses will continue 40%. But definitely wherever there is a practical or skill set required, it has to be done in on campus only, because you can't teach somebody. You can, I mean, give it demo. You can try to make them convinced how practicals are being conducted. But until unless you do, you cannot believe. So I think those parts will continue in the offline mode.
Yes, and adding to your point that it will save time for people who are living in metropolitan cities, I guess it will also provide access to students who are living in rural areas to get same quality education and opportunities
Yes.
that are there in metropolitan cities because of this technology. And
See,
we
the
are,
basic advantage is that the difference between the backbencher and the front bencher will go away. All are front benchers now. That's the
Yes.
basic advantage.
Yes.
Other side, if you see, all become the backbenchers also, because you don't know whether the lecture which is being delivered to you, are you able to grasp the same? Are you able to listen to that? Are you in a position to give attention to that? Because once you put on the computer or laptop or the mobile on, the teacher or the other part cannot see what is your intention of hearing.
Yes, definitely. But we are hoping that technology will also come up with a solution that can solve this problem.
Yeah, it is there. See, online, if I remember, when I was the Director General with the Government of India and Ministry of Electronics and IT, in 2012, I started, online exam. And I remember there was a lot of discussion how online exam will be happening. Somebody will make a cheating, what to do. So the concept of proctored remote exams came. And now you see all exams are happening in online mode only.
Yes. Yes. So you also covered a point while you were talking about this thing about new education policy. So new education policy was introduced in 2018. Do you think that government has made any efforts in that direction to implement it on ground? And if yes, then we would like to know that what government is doing to implement that new education policy, and how feasible it would be for government to implement that policy, because uh, that does not include implementing only infrastructure. It also includes training teachers about the new things that we want to teach, and about making them ready with the new technology, equipments and tools. So how feasible do you see for the government, and how much time it will take to implement the new education policy?
See, this new education policy 2020, basically it has been framed keeping into mind 2-3 major points. And I think the best part of the new education policy is that it has been prepared after, taking input from everyone, all stakeholders. And that's the result. It took time, but finally it has come out very nicely. And it take care of, first, the most important part is that the education up to 5th class has to be in local language. And I do agree, especially I personally feel that mother tongue is the most best teaching tool for anyone. So that will basically try to give inputs to the kids who are in the below the age of 5 years, 6 years, or maybe 10 years to understand the subject better. As far as you said, very rightly, because this is what is being under deliberation at various stages, that the policy has come out very nicely after incorporating the inputs from all stakeholders, from village, from the student, from the teacher, from the policymaker, from the those who are running the schools, everyone. But finally, rolling out policy is very important. I mean, mainly depend upon various parameters. For example, one of the important parameters is that we need to formulate instrument in form of legal, policy, regulatory, and institutional mechanism that is to be in place. And I think it is taking time. So that's the reason Honorable Prime Minister has now emerged both the Ministry of Education as well as the Ministry of Skill together, because the new NEP education policy has also targeted the skilling component in it. And that's the reason this time it has happened first time that the skilling and the education ministry have been clubbed together, so that there is no gap between skilling and the education part. Now, secondly, we need to build reliable information repositories. That is very important. This is what government has to work out. Then basically we have to develop adaptability across all education institutions, regulatory bodies, and government agencies. See, the rhythm between the regulatory body, the education institutes, and the government agencies has to be same. They must understand each other's language. And that is only possible by organizing workshops, by organizing, brainstorming with them, by convincing them that why it is required. So I think this is what government has started. For example, in every state, there is a mandate that they have to set up a reimaging cell for vocational education. Now it has started slowly. Many states have adopted the government of India education policy also. Others are making some minor changes because education falls under the jurisdiction of both the union government and the state government, because it is a prerogative for both the district. Then now we need to develop, sound principles of rollout and management for the education policy. We have to reward those who are in a position to roll out. We need to encourage them. We need to make them as a showcase for others also to understand. And then basically, definitely the schools have to revisit strategy of teaching and learning. That is very important, because now in the new education policy, the teaching methodology is totally different than what it is to be when in the previous education policy. So they have to. And then basically, since there is emphasis on practical and experimental learning, we need to understand how this practical learning and experimental learning will come to student, because until unless teachers themselves are trained, they cannot take it up this activity. And even the schools do not have the infrastructure for that. If you see in the village area, there are no physics lab, there are no chemistry lab. In case they are there for the sake of opening up the school, they do not have a proper infrastructure. So that need to be in place. So it means government has to work out a proper budget for this after making a study that what is the basic requirement of the budget for enhancing, for upgrading the infrastructure available in schools and colleges. And then basically another mechanism which we have to work out is, the assessment of assessment system has to be revamped. It cannot be, just by you whatever you mug up and then you put up and then you basically get the marks. Now, because the NEP is again targeting on, skill development, your personality development, your soft skill development. So we have to work out a system where we can basically know how to assess this. So Government of India as well as the respective state governments are already working on this, but definitely a dedicated team, a dedicated vision, and especially with those who have really worked in the field, those who are teaching or those who are making policies in an air-conditioned room cannot basically make it to roll out in the field. So definitely we have to pick up the champions who have worked in the field, who know what is a process engineering, how process engineering is done. A very typical example I will put up to you, that if you see the 10+2 structure, now will get replaced by 5+3+3+4, which means basically 3 to 8 age, then 8 to 11 age, 11 to 14 age, and 14 to 18 age respectively. Now this new system will have 12 years of schooling with 3 years of Anganwadi, or you can say preschooling. Now to implement the change at each level, a thorough restructuring of the curriculum, pedagogy, and content needs to be done, even in the primary school, at the Anganwadi schools also. And blending of technology with the teaching and learning process is to be built into the system. And since, as I said in the beginning, that after the COVID, the use of technology has picked up. We also need to train teachers on the use of technology. So it's a very big, very big plan which will take time. And now definitely after over all this, we also need to establish a robust digital infrastructure that even caters to the remote areas also.
I agree, and I think that government, uh, uh, if government is planning to do it all alone, it would take a longer time. Government should collaborate with different organizations and different startups that are working in education sector. They can be of a great help, and then a lot of volunteers can come forward and take this initiative to educate teachers on these new technologies, and that way we can do it in a shorter period of time.
Perfectly.
Yes, yes. So you also played an important role in the India initiative. You were among those leading e-governments for the government of India at that time. How much do you think that we have come close in our vision to transform India into a digitally empowered society and knowledge economy from there?
See, if I remember correctly, when the new government came, the present government, I mean, the initiative was basically to use the technology for all services which can be delivered to a common man. That was the basic vision. And the basic purpose of that was basically to have a smart government. When I say smart government, means simple, adaptive, responsive, transparent, like that. And that was the vision. So, there were 9 pillars which were constructed as a part of the Digital India celebration or as a part of Digital India movement, and which include the broadband highways, which include universal access to mobile connectivity, which include the public interest access program, then maybe e-Kranti, that is delivery of e-services, then e-governance, that is reforming the government through technology, and then information for all, electronics manufacturing, and IT for job. As a Director General of NILET, I basically played a major role in 2 pillars out of the 9 pillars of Digital India. One was basically public internet access program, where basically we started giving delivery of contents and support to the users, that how we can go ahead for this. And secondly, the e-Kranti, that is how services can be delivered to a common man, whether it is a grievance, it is a payment of some bill, or it is a inquiry, or it is a query, whatever it is. So these were the 2 major roles which were played. But besides to make Digital India common and popular, we have taken a target of going for a digital initiative program, which was around 8 hours to 20 hours course, which we have taken up around for 10 lakh Indian citizens. It was given to all different organizations, but NILET took a target of 10 lakh to be trained on digital literacy. So we felt that digital literacy is simple to be taught in comparison to the education literacy component. Why I'm saying so? If you see, in a population of around 138 crore Indians, almost 110 crore mobiles are there, and no one has taught us, whether we or a non-educated or a villager or anybody who is staying in remote area, how to use a mobile. And rather, I am surprised to see and say that we know less power of the mobile than those who are working in a remote area. They know everything how to use the mobile. So I think definitely this is a major role which we have played. As far as this part is concerned, government has been emphasizing very much. That's the reason a lot of investment has come into the country. A lot of manufacturing industry has come up in electronic sector. Even now we are becoming self-sustainable in mobile manufacturing. Even rather we are now importing, exporting also. So things are changing. Definitely it will take time, but there is a change. If we see into a scale of 1:10, we'll say that now it has become at the scale of 6 or 6.5 in terms of Digital India scale.
Absolutely. And now, since you are associated with an educational institute and you have worked in different industries, different sectors, what changes do you think should be made in the current education system to drive digital transformation and make a future-ready workforce?
See, now, as we discussed just now, and I deliberated that, for education institution, digital adaptation is no longer a nice to be, nice to have. Okay, it has become a mandate. In the past, if there is a school, it is having a computer or an internet connectivity or a dedicated computer lab. It was, classified as a class school in the village or the town or the city. But now it has become an essential component. Now, to ensure relevance among the target market and sustainable profitability, every education institute has to go for, digital adaptation. There is no substitute to that. In the wake of pandemic, people have begun to realize the far-reaching power of education-driven technology. There's a important impact which COVID could bring. And as the digital world requires education providers to adopt new teaching methods, platforms, and tools into the classroom, and the entire customer journey, which when I'm saying customer journey means all the stakeholders, the institutions that make this shift appear seamless and at the speed will no doubt rise above the competition. So this is from that perspective. Now, what is more important is that the education sector, like most industries, has become increasingly customer centric. This is what we are also. And when I am saying it has become a customer centric, here the customer is the student or the other stakeholders. Driving this trend is a need for end user experience driven by digital capabilities. Now, workforce engagement taking precedence with the need for remote work access and continuous access to technology. Now, data compliance and protecting information from cyber attacks and breaches also need to be looked into. That is very important for in the present system. Now, to become digital savvy in the education system, it is very important that we need to follow some guidelines, and one of them is whether we have a will to do or not. Are we doing because the market it is a market driven, or really we are keen to do something? Because if we are going for a market driven, then we may not go for the best technology, best solution. Then we'll pick up for the sake of doing it. So that is, then we need to plan the design. We have to work out that how we are going to implement, because hardly maybe 15-20% schools may be having digital technology available in the present system. Then definitely we have to take a decision. Maybe it may be investment for time being, but in long term, it will be a benefit to a particular institution. And then we have to roll out and launch. And most important out of this is that definitely we have to start teaching, the skilling and capacity building of the teachers, which is very important parameter. Now, similarly, we also need to work out that the new course contents, which are there, emerging areas, that is artificial intelligence or blockchain, maybe machine learning, maybe robotics, they need to be introduced. And for that, again, faculty also need to be trained, skilled, so that this is there. As far as your another question is concerned, that how we can basically skill our youth to meet the future target, because that we are the youngest country in the world, and as on date 62% population of the country is in the working age group, that is between 15 to 59, and 52% population is below 25 years. And this is the right time to reap the advantage of this youngest country in the world, because after 10 years we will lose the bus. We will not be able to take any advantage out of this. So it is very important that formal education in the skilling sector, or the formal skilling education, is being important to each and every student. When I am saying so, it is very important that Government of India has to encourage industry also to come forward and associate with education institutes, so that there is a difference between a skilling education and a conventional education. In conventional education, you are trying to give the knowledge to the student. It is just like, if you want to teach somebody how to drive a motorcycle on blackboard, it is a 2-minute job. You will make the wheels, clutch, key, accelerator, it will run. But if he or she has to drive on the road, it is minimum 2 to 3 days time. He or she will require. So when I am saying the education system, it is a knowledge-based system. When I am saying the skilling, it is a experience-based. That is learn and do, learn and earn. That concept has to be brought into the whole education system. Secondly, that we need to, target our, local market also for skilling. because a lot of skilling is there in the our local area where we live, where we stay. That also need to be explored by the schools and universities or the college or the education system, because many of us never want to move out from the district or the state. So that manpower can be trained into those local market or local industry requirement, and they can be worked out like that.
Definitely. And which brings to my last question, or I would say just a suggestion, that what would be your message to the future workforce, to the people who are currently in college as students?
See, I will say that do whatever you want to do. Now the concept of going for education as being taught by or told by parents, relatives, that has gone away. See, because the Gardner theory say that everybody has got 8 skill sets built into the system, and out of that one skill set he or she always leads. He may be a speaker, so he will become a politician, or maybe a marketing manager. If he is very good in mathematics, he will become some logistician, some scientist. If he is very good in sports, he will become some sportsman. So we need not to bother, because now the concept of that ego with the job, that is going. One of the reasons that ITI and VWOC course could not pick up was that we were basically linking with the social status. Now that mindset is changing. So my suggestion, my request, and my advice to the youth is that do whatever you want to do and pick up one skill set. Try to basically take the lead in that skill set, and sky is the limit for you. Because now if you see, government of India has also come out with 38 skills sectors concepts. So I mean, the opportunities are ample, and as I said just now, we are the youngest country in the world. We can become leaders, we can become Vishwaguru, and this is the only way to become Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is the vision and mission of the government of India.
That's a beautiful message. Do what you love. And with that, we come to the end of this session. This was such a beautiful and such an insightful session. Thank you for sharing so many insights.
Thank you very much.
Dr.
Namaste.
Sharma. It's our pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.